So my topic is about the, well, hello, greetings to everyone. It's a pleasure to be here. I'm very happy to be able to present about the topic that has been my interest for a number of years now, and what concerns the application of various kinds of systems that aid in navigation of vessels, to the extent that at certain points of time, these systems take over the command and control over the vessel. There's a lot of talk about autonomous vessels, there's a lot of talk about autonomy, but a lot of these features are perhaps not always properly understood by the people in charge of making these regulations that will regulate the issues. This is presently the case with IMO, and this is something that I'll be pointing to. All of these pictures that you can see are generated by AI tools that you can find online. I was using a tool called Leonardo AI. I simply made a sentence input saying, two autonomous vessels are discussing the potential of avoiding collision, cyberpunk style, and this is the kind of drawings that I got. Now, one of the biggest questions in artificial intelligence regulation is, am I the owner of this picture, or is this owned by the system that provided this generative AI tool? But that's not at least what I'm talking about. Today. Now, we're talking about regulating autonomous vessels to traverse the oceans. This issue has been dealt with, or rather, it is being dealt with in other sectors of transportation as well. One of them being the road sector, and with the advent of the so-called autonomous self-driving cars, although no such cars exist today, nor will exist in the time to come. In any case, a society that we can say is a corresponding society to IMO in the road sector is a society called the Society for Automobile Engineers. And a number of years ago, they came out with the taxonomy of these technologies in the driving sector. And they said, well, from what we can tell, there's 6 kinds of levels for these systems that are introduced into our cars that we buy and drive today that help us to drive the car by producing some sort of services on their own. So they came out with these 6 levels. Dynamic driving task, on deck, hands off, eyes off, on hand, mind off. I don't know how to remove the zoom feature. It's disruptive. I'm not going to touch it. Doesn't matter. In any case, what are these systems? Take a look at the right side of the presentation. You start up with a car that has absolutely no features whatsoever, perhaps just emergency braking. And then you continue with the very simple systems like a lights that keep on are kept on, off, cruising feature that allows you to stick to a certain speed, etc., etc. And then you continue with the features coming with the 3rd level, where you go out to a highway, you press a button, and you say, I want to be driven from Zagreb to Karlovac, from one city to another. Enter point into the highway, exit point under the highway, and provided there's no collisions or major obstacles on this specific highway, the car, or rather the system in the car, will be able to drive you from point A to point B without you as the driver of having to hold the wheel and driving around, making any kinds of dynamic driving tasks during the navigation. Then we come to level 4, which is my knowledge, self-driving. By the way, level 3, in terms of the implication of this, we already have it in Europe, in countries like Germany and France, where they enabled this by making changes to the legislation back in 2021, where they were saying on highways it is allowed to use these sort of systems, but the drivers have to be alert and have to maintain the situational awareness of what's happening on the road and be ready to take control over the car in cases of an emergency, in cases there's something that the system believes that they cannot handle an emergency on their own. Level 4 is something that you can read about is happening in places like San Francisco, Arizona, Phoenix, or several cities across China, where you have the so-called driverless self-driving taxi services. They were issued permits by the appropriate bodies, whereby you have cars that are driving passengers around certain areas of the city on their own without drivers being present in the car. There's remote operators who are supervising the cars, and if there is a necessity, they will intervene. Not always successful. If you open up newspapers or internet, you will see that there's lots of problems with these kinds of cars in San Francisco and other cities around the states where they're being tested. But in any case, such permits have already been given. No companies whatsoever, nowhere in the world have achieved this fully autonomous driving feature that would be level 5, that you cannot see because of the zoom thing here. what the promise of this full autonomy in terms of cars, motor vehicles, is that the car, or rather the system itself, will be able to handle all the emergencies on the road without any assistance or taking over control by a human driver, human technical supervisor, or remote operator. Again, so far this hasn't been achieved, and a lot of the engineers are saying it would be very difficult to achieve those sort of things. Unlike the approach of the engineers in the road sector, and mind you, this was accepted by the legal side of the affairs by amending the 1968 Vienna Convention on Road Traffic, whereby they introduced the so-called vehicle systems and autonomous driving systems. So they enabled, in terms of the legal framework, they enabled the AI of being in charge of the complete navigation, rather driving of the car. Unlike what they've done in our sector, in the C sector, it seems to me, and this is my personal subjective opinion, that the approach taken by the IMO to consider how to regulate this perhaps fails to understand the importance of artificial intelligence. If you look at the currently existing categories, you will find that basically the way that the IMO has started work back in 2017 was to say that we have to make a significant differentiation between occasions where we have seafarers on board the vessels and seafarers on shore, so-called remote operators. My point is, remote operators on the shore can do exactly the same thing as seafarers on the vessel. Therefore, they can completely control the vessel as if they're on board the vessel. And you have a number of companies in the UK and other parts of the world for controlling these remote operated vessels that are close shore capacity vessels. Therefore, they're not venturing too far away into the sea. Rather, they're sticking next to the coast and they're going around several European countries in the UK. Now, for them, there's no time difference. Therefore, it's basically what they do from the remote control center. They do pretty much everything that a seafarer would do by utilizing technology that is available on the ship. However, we are discussing about systems that either assist seafarers in navigating, controlling and navigating the vessel, or taking this control on their own. So therefore, my point is, they should look at what the CAI has done in the road sector. They should try to consider whether they should reclassify, recategorize, if you like, these levels of autonomy. And speaking about levels of autonomy, they talk about fully autonomous vessels, and I'll come back to this in a second. Okay. So during the, as Igor has pointed out, we've been present online though at the last meeting, joint meeting of Black Paul and MSC, where they decided to create this joint working group to discuss issues concerning the regulation of the autonomous vessels. And they came up with a number of points that they believe are relevant and are most important points to be made when considering the future regulation of the MAS. One of them being that the MAS must have a human master, and the other one being that the master has to have the ability, the technical ability, to intervene at any given point when it's necessary to take control of the vessel and do whatever is necessary. They're saying, well, perhaps we consider delegating some roles of the master to somebody else, but they haven't really well delved into this too much. So so a number of questions are raised in my mind when I consider these points. First of all, do they really understand what the point of fully autonomous vessels is? The point from the industry's perspective, the point of the fully autonomous vessels is that these vessels can go out from one continent to another and do everything on their own, without the necessity of employing seafarers or whoever is in charge to be linked to that ship. So the point of this technology one day is to provide a system framework, a network framework that will allow these vehicles in the air, on the road, and in the sea to transport goods and people on their own. Technology autonomous versus autonomized. The road sector has preferred to the autonomized term because autonomous would mean that the ships are thinking on their own, deciding on their own where to go, what to do. And that's not the point of this technology. The point is to have them autonomized in the navigation. The role of artificial intelligence, product liability insurance, to my mind, and this is something that was actually approved, well, recognized by this joint working group. They said, yes, we're now discussing these things. This is something that LAC should take over and discuss at a later point, but we still don't know whether and when this will happen. But I believe that this is something that is likely to find. And finally, remote operators. If I can go back one step back, remotely controlled ship, as you can see, This is a very important thing to be considered when you think about regulation from the IMO's perspective, whether you have seafarers on board or on the shore. However, remote operations can be AI as well, can be powered by AI systems as well, artificial intelligence systems. So therefore, you could have a remote operation that is performed by an AI system, not a human. So this is something that hasn't been considered at all. Previously, as a purpose, prior to the scoping exercise that was conducted for a number of years, the IMOS came up with a provisional definition of what a mass ship consists of. And they said that this is a ship to which the daring degree can operate independently of human interaction. Again, doesn't really stick necessarily with the other points that we made so far. And they said that they need to further look into the meaning of the master crew. This is something that is to be well dealt with. It was the next meeting was supposed to be held this week, but this was delayed. We don't know when the next meeting will take place. And we'll talk about the context of the responsible person, and by responsible person there, at this point, focuses on remote operators, nothing else. Roles and responsibilities, and several activities that are relevant in terms of COLREGs. This is watchkeeping actions by personnel, and then manual operations alarms. One of the questions that were raised by both by the LAC committee within the IMO and, for example, CMI as well, was whether COLREGs, all the provisions contained in COLREGs, can be accommodated to accept the application to NAS. What am I referring to? I've only picked two examples. There's more to be made. But just to give you an idea of what I'm talking about, Rule 2A is talking about the responsibility, general responsibility of any vessel owner, ship operator, concerning the negligent performance of their duties. Ordinary practice of seamen in the context of algorithm data training. Point is, if we allow a certain system to perform an activity that is so far performed by a human seafarer, how do we know that this system is capable of achieving the same level of skill, care, knowledge as performed by an ordinary seafarer? Will this require us to change the SCTV convention to accommodate for AI training as well? We don't know. Currently, we have a number of projects that have occurred or are occurring as we speak, where they're testing semi-autonomous vessels like the one in Japan, the one in Norway, where we even have one ferry that operates for, I think, already more than a year in one very short canal in Norway. And this is a very limited geographical area, but it does function on its own. I think there is a possibility of taking remote control in case of emergencies. So it's not fully autonomous, but it already does quite a lot. But the question is, the data they've used to train the algorithm to run those systems, to operate this vessel on its own, is this the data that will be used by all the other companies who are producing these systems? I choose the term companies that are producing systems. I'm not necessarily choosing the term companies that are producing, building ships, because we might be talking about two different sets of industries and companies altogether. And this is something that I'll come back to in a second. Well, actually, I'm coming back to this right now. Will the term any vessels contained in this Rule 2A include new entrants to the liability scheme? And I'm talking about producers, but I'm also talking about the term backhand operators. What is a backhand operator? You have a car, you have a navigation system. And there is a request, suddenly you turn on the engine and there comes a request. You have to update your navigation system by this and this date. Otherwise, the system will cease to function. If you don't hit the update button, or don't do the update manually by downloading the package from their website, you won't be able to use this feature, even though you purchased the car and the car is yours. Meaning that there's a company, it could be the company that produced your car, it could be a third company, that is in constant digital connection to a device or a piece of software in your car. And without this digital connection, your car, as you purchase it, wouldn't be able to perform all the functions that were promised to you as the buyer when you were making that purchase. Having this in mind, I just gave you an example of the car that perhaps all of us can understand. The EU is now in the process of amending the directive on product liability. That is a very old, like from the 90s. And they've introduced this term of the back-end operator by saying that the producer remains liable during the duration of the product's life, if there is this digital connection of the product, the buyer, and the producer. Your smart TVs, your smart mobile phones, your smart watches, everything that is digital and that requires updates care about the operating system, et cetera, there's a connection with a certain company that enables that thing that you purchase to work properly. You have this back-end operator. Why is this, to my mind, relevant to the topic that we talked about today? Take a look at the last sentence. You're the owner or the ship operator, put all that in the creation law context. And you are operating this vessel by performing the remote center supervision of the vessel that is passing, that is navigating the Adriatic Sea or the Atlantic, doesn't matter. And all of a sudden, there is an emergency request coming in from the ship, from the system, saying, we request your human remote operator to take control, real-time control over the vessel. What your remote operator is basing its capacity to respond to this emergency is the data that is coming from all the technology, the sensors, and the software on that ship. What happens if the technology is erroneous, is faulty? What happens if the sensors are not getting all the data that is necessary to make the right decision? Your remote operator makes a faulty decision based on the faulty data that was received by the faulty equipment installed on the ship. Is this still your responsibility as the owner, as the one who is providing these remote operation services? Or perhaps should you talk to the producer as well, or the backend operator, and say perhaps you should take blame as well, or take even exclusive blame? In the road sector, what we're seeing today, and this is everything that I'm talking about is happening during the last few years, we see changes in appreciation of this. UK, for example, back in 2018 said the producers have to have product liability, third-party liability, as a mandatory assurance in case something goes wrong while this system was performing the dynamic driving functions of the car. The French have changed their criminal law 2 years ago. They said if one can establish fault on the side of this system that was operating, controlling the car when the accident occurred, you can hold producer criminal liable. So we're seeing the change in how the different legislators are approaching this issue, realizing that producers are now playing a major role in how these vehicles operate today. And it's not necessarily no longer the case that you're looking at the driver or the owner and saying, well, there is a person who's to be blamed, who is responsible. Who will take responsibility for the decisions made by the AI? Are we capable of understanding how does this work? In connection to this last sentence, perhaps in my mind, the most interesting, if not most important, rule of COLREGs is your ability to circumnavigate the rules. If you, as a captain, first officer, believe that you have to set the rules aside and do whatever is right to avoid that collision, based on your skill, knowledge, and the years and years you've been doing this work. Do we have any proof that the algorithm can do the same? If the algorithm decides to dislodge the rules and act on its own, will we be able to understand how the algorithm came to such a decision? There's a number of examples out there where engineers are not capable of understanding how the AI makes decisions. Why? Because AI considers tens of thousands, millions, if you like, different facts, points of information when making their decisions, whereas humans are limited to a far smaller number. Are we capable of understanding truly how do we do this? Are we able to quantify this? A lot of folks are saying, no, we're not. It's not possible to quantify the decision-making process of the algorithm. And most importantly, when we come to court proceedings, will the court experts be able to understand why one ship controlled by AI has done one thing and the other thing? Can we rely on court expertise? Who will this be? Seafarers, IT experts? What exactly are we talking about? Is there a standard that will explain how this is made? So when, for example, talk about fault liability or strict liability in the context of, for example, collisions, in case involving mass or partially involving mass, to my mind, at least at this point, strict liability would be a better, more cautious way forward. Until that time, we can answer some of these questions. That's my approach at this point. I could be wrong. The same could be said about other rules in the COLREGs as well. So what is happening right now at the IMO level? Well, they're saying we need to push this forward therefore 40 cargo ships by 2025, non-mandatory rules, 1 year appreciation, and then 2026 mandatory. How will this work? We'll see. They're saying for a lot of things, we don't think that we have to change international maritime law. A lot of the conventions out there will be able to accept mass, but for some conventions, including COLREGs, it remains dubious whether COLREGs will be able to accommodate all the needs that are required, especially where we have stricter sense of human seafarers, nominators, the persons have to do certain things. So we'll see where this goes. Finally, this is the last slide. Why these pictures? Why did I put them in? I've written in the same tool I said Croatian Maritime Law Association logo, future logo, and gave me this. Now, what's the point? What's the point of these pictures? I have no idea why this AI generated tool decided to make it look. I said, okay, I said cyberpunk style, doesn't matter. But the point is, there's some letters down there, and they're not eligible. We cannot read. We don't know what these letters mean. But there was a case where the Google engineers or Meta engineers created two bots, and they made those two bots talk. On the first day, they talked in English. By the beginning of the second day, they developed language of their own, and they communicated. The engineers could tell, yes, we can see they're communicating, but we don't understand them. So when the two, why this? So to come back to the very first, why this picture in the middle, where you see two ships that are half robots, half ships that are talking? Will we be able to understand why, when these two ships find themselves somewhere out there in the sea, one goes to the right, one goes to the left? Will we be able to understand why? And think about a manned ship approaching unmanned ships, autonomous vessel. If I was a captain on this ship, I would be very afraid because I'm not sure whether I'll be able to understand, even if there are signals coming out from that ship, would I be able to understand what this ship is trying to communicate? So we have to be extra careful. The countries like US, China, EU as a country, they're all working on regulating artificial intelligence, and it's all risk-based. And it's not this draft EU AI Act, it's not meant to be applicable to the transport sector, maritime sector, but we have to learn something from this. We are in a high risk level, so the highest level of risk to human welfare and human health, human body. So we need to consider whether there's something to be learned from this, and the application of artificial intelligence for making decisions to detect lives, property, and other things. It has to stand for something. And I'm not sure that IMO is thinking about this when they're trying to regulate that. I think they're taking the traditional approach. In the context of autonomous technology, this will not do. Thank you very much for